Pornography. It feels like it's everywhere, and the debate about porn keeps heating up. Is porn addictive? Are our relationships being hurt or helped by pornography? Why did humans evolve to copulate with a screen? This is Mating Matters. I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh. On this episode of Mating Matters, the Pornography MindF. First of all, producer Brooke Peterson and I decided to do this episode partly because you asked us to. We received emails from women who claim that pornography has ruined their relationships. We've heard from men, some who asked us not to use their name or voice, but told us that they think pornography has made it impossible for them to maintain an erection with a real woman. So we set out to answer these questions using science. Is porn addictive? And why did humans evolve to be attracted to porn? Is there a mating advantage or disadvantage? Now, this episode comes with a warning. We will be using some sounds of humans engaging in sex or autosexual behavior, that's called masturbation. If you are a minor, that is under the age of 18, this content isn't appropriate. Despite the debate about porn's harm, everyone agrees that pornography isn't good for the developing brain. So, if you're under 18, I suggest you move to the next episode. I mean it. Kitties, skedaddle. Are the kids gone? Okay. If you're an adult, I have another warning for you. You may find yourself feeling spontaneously aroused by some of my explanations and sound effects. Please know this is natural, normal, and you have my permission to not feel guilty about it. In fact, if you do become aroused, it illustrates the biggest lesson of this podcast. Pornography is an evolutionary trap. The urge to reproduce in humans is so strong that our brains can be tricked very easily into thinking we're reproducing. But you can't reproduce by having sex with a podcast. Skin slapping and female moaning. It's the audio staple of pornography. And these sounds alone can cause humans to have an instant physical reaction. Blood may flow to the genitals. Heart rate may increase. And you might get that hormonal boost that feels kind of like butterflies in your pelvis. But why would Mother Nature have caused this trigger when clearly there's no way listening to or watching others have sex has a reproductive advantage for you? More important thing about human mating that might have impacted the evolution of porn. In humans, copulation only needs to be wanted by one half of a mating pair for it to work. Think about it. Even rape can still create a pregnancy. So the computer doesn't have to like or even care that you're having sex with it.
Have you ever taken a penis all the way down to the bottom of your throat?
No. I try, but I choke.
Ah, well, now, and here it's a matter of discipline. You have to learn to relax the muscles. You have to regulate your breathing to the movement of your head.
Okay, let's jump to recent history and filmed public sex. What you just heard was the famous doctor's office scene from the movie Deep Throat. It sounds corny now, but back in 1972, Deep Throat began the cinematic wave that evolved into our mainstream porn industry. It was one of the first pornographic films to have a plot, some character development, and for the times at least, high production values. It was hailed as the emancipation of hardcore porn from the dark shadows and into mainstream cinema. I should add that its star, Linda Lovelace, who became hugely famous at the time, later wrote a book called Out of Bondage, where she said that far from enjoying her career in the sex industry, she suffered from PTSD from sex abuse. Which always brings the chicken or the egg question. Did the porn industry cause the abuse, or are people with sexual trauma in childhood more attracted to sex work as adults?
She's got to have it.
You make it sound so easy.
Well, it is. Try it. You'll like it.
Well, what have I got to lose?
Come, you try it with me.
And so porn evolved from girly magazines to Deep Throat to adult video rentals to the World Wide Web. Pornography has become a reported $97 billion industry. That was billion with a B.
Oh, God. Oh, yes, 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 yes.
That isn't porn. That's Meg Ryan showing Billy Crystal how easy it is for men to fall for a woman's fake orgasm. It is the 1989 romantic comedy When Harry Met Sally. And she was right. Every day, millions of people get duped when they watch porn. According to the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, porn sites have more traffic than, get this, Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. And of people aged 13 to 24, 64% watch porn every week.
I'll have what she's having.
On the illegal cable box, there was a little button on the back that would unblur these channels, and discovering that so early, that like channel 69 on the cable box, you would get this weird, like partially blurry, like, oh, I saw a boob kind of thing in the corner. Like, yeah.
When I was a teenager, you kind of had to go embarrass yourself into a shop to buy a magazine or get some older bloke to buy it for you. These days, for teenagers, etc., young lads, it's just, young women too for that matter, but it's just a case of clicking.
And clicking people do. The top search term on porn sites? The word teen. Why, might you ask? Well, you could argue that far from being a population of pedophiles, people associate their most intense arousal memories with their teenage years and may want to recapture that feeling. And yes, men are wired to respond to youth and beauty because it signals fertility. The most common pornography customer is a young, unmarried, sexually active male with higher education and income and lots of computer access. But I guess you knew that. But can pornography affect your brain? Let's look at some of the data. Since 2011, there have been dozens of studies that point to pornography having a negative impact on the brain. But all of them are correlational rather than causational. Just because two factors show up together doesn't mean that one caused the other. For instance, in 2014, the Max Planck Institute for Human Development in Berlin found that increased pornography use is linked to decreased brain matter in the areas of the brain associated with motivation, decision-making, impulse control, and the users showed desensitization to sexual reward. However, you could also argue that people with pre-existing decreased gray matter may just crave porn more. The problem with all research on pornography is that researchers have had a heck of a time creating a true experimental study, meaning one group of users who use pornography compared with another group who have never, ever been exposed to porn.
And that's what's interesting. We don't have a control group. We, to find that maybe 0.05% of the population that's never seen pornography, where do they live, right? As a way to track them longitudinally to see what are the different forms of development. We'll never know.
That's Dr. Chris Donahue, the author of Rebel Love and co-host of the radio show Loveline. He also has a private practice where he treats what he calls porn compulsion, not addiction. He says frequency of pornography use isn't necessarily an indicator of a problem.
A standard form of masturbation for a lot of men is anywhere from 1 to 3 times a day. And so it's not really for me in diagnostics about quantity. It's really about the impact. How in control or out of control is the client feeling? Is there shame tied to what they're doing? Is it negatively impacting important domains of their life? And if so, what are ways that we can kind of reorient that? Because it's not about removing sexuality.
The jury is still out on whether pornography can be addictive. Porn addiction is still not a bona fide diagnosis. The Clinician's Bible, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, does include a new section for behavioral addictions, but that section only mentions one behavioral disorder, pathological gambling, not sex addiction, not porn addiction. But even though a certain level of compulsive porn use can't technically be called an addiction, there may still be serious signs of problems.
Some people, through their pornography use, are constantly pushing the boundaries on their level of arousal. And they're constantly seeking higher levels and higher levels. And so they're pushing and pushing. And what does that mean? It means a different thing for different clients, which is for some of them, the length of time they're using. For others, it's how taboo what they're looking at is getting. And the work is about having them understand that partnered sexuality is not going to always match that level of arousal, and that you will get into trouble if your work is about pushing and pushing. Also, some of them internalize a working model of sexuality that can't be mimicked with a partner as well, whether it's the body type, the activities. Others, it's become a coping mechanism that they can't always have access to, where if you've had a rough day at the office, you can't go into the bathroom and masturbate to pornography as a way to cope.
Dr. David Ley, author of The Myth of Sex Addiction, found that people who report great anguish over controlling their porn use aren't actually using porn more. They just feel worse about it. He says it's the moral conflict that gets people. Believe it or not, religiosity combined with porn use tends to produce more stress, anxiety, and depression. In many religions, there are often negative messages about sex and very strict rules against intercourse before marriage, causing many people to deny their very human sexuality, especially if they're younger or unmarried. People with repressed sexuality may dip their toe into pornography to just see what it's about. But afterwards, they experience so much shame. Then they find themselves going back to more porn to get some dopamine to relieve the uncomfortable feelings. And there becomes the cycle. Pornography's biggest damage may not be to the brain itself, but rather to relationships.
There's only a few things I really care about in life. My body, my bed, my ride, my family, my church, my boys, my girls. And my porn. I know, that last one sounds weird, but I'm just being honest. Nothing else does it for me the same way. Not even real pussy.
Don John was a mainstream romantic comedy that came out in 2013. It was written and directed by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who also starred in the movie with Scarlett Johansson. It's the story of a young man who can't seem to stop using pornography, even though his gorgeous girlfriend asks him to.
I couldn't do it all for you.
Well, when a real man loves a woman, he doesn't mind doing things for her. All right, he'll do anything for her.
Yeah, but don't you think that sounds a little bit one-sided?
No, I don't. But that's why you like to watch those whores in those videos, because you don't gotta do anything for them, right?
Yeah, that's one-sided also, definitely.
This woman, who told us it's okay to use her name, Ashley, says pornography first became a problem when she was in a young relationship.
My first relationship I was 18 years old. I got pregnant in high school, actually. And we got married and kind of tried to make it work. And I found out about halfway through my pregnancy that my husband at the time was viewing pornography on a regular basis. He kind of admitted to maybe 3 to 6 hours a day.
But with Ashley and her husband, the problem was much more than the number of hours he was viewing.
With my first relationship, it escalated to a very dark place where it was turning into I guess they call them snuff films, rape and murder. And so that's where it got really scary for me.
That relationship eventually ended. And now, at the age of 32, Ashley says pornography has entered her newest relationship. She had been dating her boyfriend for 3.5 years, and the two had just moved in together. But she felt the intimacy was starting to fade. One night, she made a discovery that triggered fearful feelings from her previous relationship.
I woke up actually in the middle of the night, and I just had this really panicked feeling, and my stomach was in knots. We were sleeping on the couch together, and I saw his phone next to me, and I had never looked through his phone before. And I just found a website, I guess regular pornography. And of course, all of these emotions were going through me. I felt really triggered. I kind of went right back to my 18-year-old self, finding it at 6 months pregnant. When he recalls this story, he says that I was a bit more emotional than I'm relaying to you right now. But in my perspective, I remember just saying, I found what you were looking at. I don't understand why, I guess I don't understand why we haven't had sex in a couple of weeks, but yet you're doing that, can you explain, kind of? And he felt really, violated. He felt really disrespected. And so he got a little bit emotional, and he just kind of said, is there a problem with this?
And it's this emotional violation that can wreak havoc with relationships.
We just moved in together. We just got engaged actually shortly before this. And I just almost felt like a crazy person.
In 2014, researchers Doran and Price reported adults who viewed online porn in the last 30 days or an X-rated movie in the past year were more likely to be divorced and more likely to have an extramarital affair. And those who had viewed an X-rated movie were also less happy with their marriage and less happy overall. But I remind you, this is correlational. Regular exposure to pornography is also associated with lower levels of relationship commitment and satisfaction with a romantic partner. Studies of women in heterosexual relationships show that male partners' private pornography use decreases their sexual desire for women as well as their feelings of intimacy.
Because he struggles with depression. And I don't know if this is just kind of an excuse, but he says sometimes it's really hard for him to be intimate, with me as a person, to get up the energy to kiss me and court me and make love to me. Whereas it's just so easy just to look at pornography and it actually makes him feel a little bit better.
Competing with state-of-the-art bodies and impossibly beautiful women can also damage a wife's sense of self and undermine overall relationship quality and stability.
I went from feeling very safe and trusting in our relationship to just feeling super anxious and super untrusting and jealous and insecure.
It's hard to argue that porn's reach hasn't stretched into fashion. When a girl working on a sandwich counter in a small town is wearing platform spike heels, strips of false eyelashes, lip plumper, and bleached hair, you can assume these fashion choices were designed for men who are informed by pornography. Now, there's one caveat to all that research. When women and men watch pornography together, it can actually improve their sex life and intimacy. But most women didn't evolve to be visually wired. I happen to be one of them. Porn is just funny to me. It's not arousing at all.
When I talk to clients and they tell me, I watch pornography, I'll say to them, what kind are you watching? Are you watching the kind of pornography that really exists in terms of partner in the world? Because the answer is going to be no. I'm assuming the kind of people you're watching do not exist in the world in that way. So I direct people towards body positive, feminist based porn. And there's some really stunning feminist based porn where it's more about affection and courtship, honoring a female's boundaries and her pleasure.
There's even a growing trend of home video porn where the porn actors are real people and make the money straight from the consumer to cut out that giant pornography industry. And if other people are in those videos who haven't given consent, states are now cracking down on that.
So what's really great is a bunch of states, California, Oregon, and I think like 3 or 4 others have passed revenge porn laws. And basically what that means is that if you take any sexual photos or videos of someone else that you've been sent and you distribute them or post them, you are violating the law. That someone sending you something does not transfer ownership. And so you can't say you sent it to me. Unless you get explicit consent that I'm giving you ownership, they can do nothing with it. So if they share it, send it, or post it, there's jail time and there's a huge fine.
Dr. Donahue says pornography may even be beneficial to a culture.
You know, the studies show that cultures that have more permissibility around sex and they have the ability to encounter it and talk about it have lower rates of sex crimes, lower rates of teen pregnancy, lower rates of STD, because people at least are learning the languaging. They're learning to set boundaries.
That's the drumbeat of proponents of internet porn. They point to the facts that since porn became so accessible, rates of abortions, STIs, rape, divorce, and teen pregnancies have all gone down. But again, these are correlational studies. There could easily be many other contributing factors to this. And as for learned sexual aggression due to exposure to increasingly violent porn, the research news isn't good. Paul Wright and Ashley Krause of Indiana University and Robert Tukunaga of the University of Hawaii set out to find if pornography consumption was directly linked to actual acts of sexual aggression. They looked at 22 different studies from 7 countries. Their conclusion? They found that consumption of pornography was associated with verbal sexual aggression and physical aggression. So, there you have the risks. Porn is not good for a developing brain. It's not good for relationships when it becomes a replacement for intimacy. And it may even increase sexual violence. On the other hand, pornography can help keep long-term relationships happy when one partner can't have sex any longer, either because of illness, injury, or aging. It can spice up healthy monogamy, and it can give a sexual outlet to people who might not be able to find partners. But back to evolution for a moment. Could porn be evolving to replace human-to-human sex? To answer that question, we need to talk about Australian beetles.
My interest is in sexual selection theory and understanding the evolution of sex differences and using insects to do experiments to understand what it is that controls the differences between the sexes, particularly in behavior. You know, the classic competitive male and choosy female that we see across the animal kingdom.
That's Daryl Gwynn from the University of Toronto. A few decades back, Gwynn was traveling with his research partner, David Rentz of James Cook University. He's a curator of orthopteroid insects in Australia, namely crickets. They were camping on the west coast of Australia looking for separate insect species.
I'd strolled out from the campsite in the morning sunlight to the nearest dirt road, and all along the road were these what they call stubby bottles, beer bottles, brown beer bottles. And what really caught my attention was that every bottle that I could see had an associated beetle on top of it or by the side of it. And I was very inquisitive as to what was going on, so I got a much closer look. And to my delight, I discovered they were males. They were all males. You could tell. I mean, I don't know much about beetles, but I do know enough about beetles to know the differences in the genitalia. And you could see the enormous adyagus, the penis of the male beetle, probing away at the glass at the back of each beer bottle. And so there was something really bizarre going on here.
That something really bizarre was that beer bottles were becoming sex objects, and the males couldn't get enough of them.
We surmised, and with a rough experiment as well, we surmised what was going on was they were attracted to the brown shiny glass of the beer bottle, and to them it was a super female. It was a giant female, and they were lured into trying to mate with it.
So these male beetles were attempting to mate with beer bottles.
One of the things that came to mind was, well, maybe they're attracted to the residual alcohol in the bottle, or something about the constituents of the beer that was left in the bottle. And so we took a bunch of bottles and washed them out, cleaned them, put them back on the roadway, and sure enough, within a few minutes, each bottle had another beetle on it. So it looked like it definitely was the glass that was attracting them.
And did you know what the female looked like at that point?
Yeah, you could find the females nearby on vegetation.
When you mentioned that female beetle sitting over in the vegetation by herself, I picture an attractive woman sitting alone in her apartment, while a male who could be mating with her is off looking at a super female in the form of pornography. What do you think about that kind of connection?
I think it's perfectly appropriate to at least hypothesize about that kind of connection because, as I said earlier, I study sex differences in animals. We're an animal species, and there is much about the sex differences in our psychology and behavior that is parallel to what we see in the animal kingdom. I mean, the basic thing is sperm's cheap, so there's no reason why past natural selection pressures, or sexual selection pressures as they would be officially, would have produced males that basically are triggered into sexual behavior more easily than females. The starter motors of men being more easily triggered by something like a computer screen, with some brief image, a glimpse of some naked breasts or something. And that all it can take for a lot of men or a lot of young lads to be triggered into the starter motor get going so that they're basically turned on.
He calls this a mating error, common to males across many species, including humans.
It makes sense that a male being turned on easily by something on a screen and leading through to fulfillment, ejaculation, or whatever, is very similar to what we see in the animal kingdom. In fact, there's lots of cases, way more cases than just our beetles on the bottles. There's all sorts of examples of mating errors and distractions, these evolutionary traps in nature, and it's always males. I have challenged my students in one of my courses. Do you come up with a single case of maybe, we'll say, a non-human animal where the female is making a mating error? And they've yet to come through with one yet.
Back in Australia, Dr. Gwynn wondered if the beetles who were making the mating error with the beer bottles might be under population threat. So he wrote a letter to the brewing company.
There were little punctations, little dents in the shell, the back of the beetle, that their reflection patterns from those was very similar to the reflection patterns from parts of the beer bottle that had little tiny bumps on it. And so I suggested in my letter to the Swan Brewery Company that they might consider redesigning the beer bottle. They never wrote back, and I don't know how many years later, but it wasn't that long after that the stubby bottle in Western Australia, those little bumps on it were suddenly taken off.
So what does all this mean for the future of our species? Well, Dr. Donahue assures us that pornography is here to stay, and it's our job to navigate it.
So I think the way I look at it is we live in a world with a lot of access to media and technology, and we just have to learn how to really understand what it's about, what might be the healthy parts, the unhealthy parts, languaging to talk about it, because we can't protect anyone from these things. And the impact of it, it's hard to say. It's really hard to say because it's hard to find a man in our culture that hasn't looked at pornography.
Okay, so porn is good and porn is bad, and for some people, it can be a real problem. What's someone supposed to do if he or she thinks that they or someone they know has an issue with pornography? Well, Dr. Donahue says the solution is simple, but it may not be easy.
And so the first part of the work is often just taking a break from pornography and seeing if they can find a way to deal with lower levels of arousal and have partnered sexuality. And some people, that's it. That's the treatment. It's just managing the high-risk situations, dealing with the triggers, and really learning how to deal with boundaries. But it's difficult work because sex is everywhere. It's really hard to deal with something that's constantly a trigger and finding ways to live in moderation.
It makes me wonder, though, are we moving toward a future where reproduction will be completely outsourced to technology, where babies will grow in test tubes, men will have sex with computers, and women will be struggling to hold this new kind of family together? Dr. Gwynn doesn't think so. He thinks men who don't use pornography may have a sexual selection advantage.
I would say that those males that had a tendency to spend less time with the magazines and screens and instead went out on a Saturday night to look for somebody lovely to mate with would be selected for. We are still evolving in some ways as a species, and that would certainly, if it was a wholesale movement to pornography, I'm certain that those males that paid less attention to the pornography would be selected for, to put it in Darwinian terms.
Thank you for listening to Mating Matters. This is the final episode of our very first season, but we are not going anywhere. Stay with us. We plan to give you lots of fun bonus episodes, some longer form interviews, some answers to your calls. So stay tuned. We'll be back. Coming up in season 2, we're going to look at the evolution of the dark side of love, extreme mate guarding. Also, on a happier note, 12 reasons why women have sex. Yes, there are many reasons why women have sex. And a look at polyamory. Why did it evolve in our species? And we've got lots more coming up in season 2 of Mating Matters. Mating Matters is produced in partnership with iHeartMedia. It is researched, interviewed, and written by me, Dr. Wendy Walsh, and it is edited and produced by Brooke Peterson. You know, people don't learn about podcasts usually by just searching around. They learn about a podcast because somebody who loved that podcast told them about it. So I encourage you to please subscribe, write a review, and more than anything, hit that share button now. Think of somebody who would like to hear this information as much as you enjoyed it. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Dr. Wendy Walsh. Listen to Mating Matters on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh. If you'd like to call the Mating Matters message line, you certainly can. The number is 323-207-8277. That's 323-207-8277. If you got a question, we want to hear it. Or maybe you have a comment. Either way, we love to hear from you, our listener.